But here we go, live recording. This is it.
We're rocking, we're rolling.
Rocking and a rolling. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to the dumbest, shittiest, most fucked up, most disease-riddled, virus-infected, fucked up, AIDS epidemic. Everyone is fucked on the side of the road. Fly, maggot-infested fucking podcast that's ever existed since the dawn of humanity.
Fauci just salivating.
Oh, man, I'm here with a very, very special guest situation. This is, I don't do very many live shows, so I don't know how many people we even have in here. We have, I don't even know how to look it up, brother. People? Let's look under people. Let's see how this works. I have no idea how many people are in here, so I don't even know how to look it up. But I'm gonna pull up the chat box. For anyone that is in here, I am going to have the chat box up during this because this is more of a audience interactive situation. I wish I could see how many people are in here.
Apparently we've got 17 so far.
How did you find that?
Audience. I'm looking at people on the right column for me. I don't know how it displays for you, but I got a right column right now that shows people, and it's got 2 people in the studio, 17 in the audience. Cheers to everybody joining us.
I don't see that, but all right, good. 17 people. My guest knows what's going on better than I do. That's good. I'm doing good as a host so far, guys. I think we'll just keep it up, okay?
Hey, it's building, so keep doing what you're doing. It's working.
All right, good.
18.
So, awesome. So this show, for the people who don't know, this show, I did a show with Alexander on his Rethink show. And it was sort of like an introductory show. It was originally going to be kind of like a debate, but it wound up not really being much of a debate. It wound up being more of a discussion, which was really cool. I actually really enjoyed our show. In fact, it's probably one of the shows I've enjoyed more than almost any show, even though you kind of poked at me a little bit on the goddamn recording, you fucker.
In what way? What do you mean?
The little counter on the bottom right. I thought it was a frame rate counter at first. I'm like, damn, like
cracking me up.
They got a fucking frame rate counter because I'm a gamer. I'm a computer gamer, so I've got a RTX 4090 in my computer. Literally 4 fucking power connectors all come together into one connector to fucking power my video card. And I thought like, oh, this dude's got like a fucking frame rate on his shit. This is gangster, right?
Can I give an explanation? Because if you go back and watch like old episodes of mine, it's riddled with fucks. They exist. But YouTube gives you a carrying capacity. So, like, if you're going to talk about real things, you got to walk a tight line because they're itching to police people. And so, I remember doing the episode with you, and we're like 10 minutes in, and in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, we've gone over. I'll just cut everything out. And then like 2 hours, and so the reason there's a counter is because, dude, I got like 25 in, maybe a half hour into the show, and I was MFing you something fierce in my studio. I'm just like, this son of a, and I'm like, how many has it been? So really, I just did the counter for my own sanity as I got like 254, if anyone was note, and
254.
A couple people in the comments noticed I missed a few. That's fine. It's also because my psyche was on the verge of snap. Dude, it was fun. And then people are like, well, why didn't you tell him to stop? Because I want to have like a free flow conversation. I'm not trying to sit here and police the dialogue. And, we can skirt.
Well, the reason why it's funny is because I talk about that on all my shows, and I never have any issues. I don't even get age restrictions. I get nothing. Now, People think I'm an agent. I've actually literally had haters be like, everyone else is getting blocked, everyone else is getting shadow banned. Your stuff, not only does it not get any of that, it's getting organically shown, like recommended for you, literally. They're literally recommending my stuff. And I'm over here like, okay, how could that be? There's only I have 2 explanations for that, just for anybody who may be wondering that. First off, you can check my YouTube channel. It's like, I created this channel, didn't do much with it since like 2006 or 7 or 8 or 9 or something. So, and then my Facebook profile, I was literally one of like the first several thousand people on Facebook ever, way back at the beginning. You had to actually have like college credentials, and it was like a whole process. I was like on MySpace, and I was like, oh, cool, this new Facebook thing. It's only for college kids. I was in college. That seemed cool. So I'm like a legacy user on all these platforms. That's the first thing. This is just my own. This is just the only explanation I have for any of this. The second thing would be I stay away from the hot topics that get people in a lot of trouble. I don't really see the need to talk about them. They don't necessarily need to fit into my platform. They're almost just like, I guess I could if I wanted to, but I just kind of chose not to. And then the third reason, and probably the most important reason, is I spend a absolute asinine amount of money on all of these platforms. On YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. In the past 10 years, I've probably spent maybe not well over, but over $1 million in paid advertising for all these different companies, different dental offices, all these different things that I've done over the past decade, if not maybe 14 years, because I started to really get into all that in like 2010. And then before that, right around 2010, I was running a Google AdWords grant campaign for a nonprofit organization. So if I were to add that in, it's probably like $1.2 million or $1.3 million. So I think all that combined together is really why I don't have these kinds of issues, and I can curse 254 times, and I don't even get an age restriction. I don't know what else it could be. So
but I do want to get into the meat of stuff with you because you have a lot for me. But if I could give you what I really do think it is in addition to that, like if you're the advertising circumvents all of the hurdles a lot, but even more so, if I take my personal account and I'm trying to shift it now into this new space, there's people from my high school and my college that are like catty humans that want to watch. They want to watch. They're hoping for your failure, but they don't actually hit the like button. They don't actually support you. That's a huge chunk of the dead weight you're carrying. And Facebook, Instagram, all these algorithms look at it and go, oh, well, this is shitty content. But really, it's because Stacy, who you haven't spoken to in 20 years, just watches. She never likes. And whereas if you start an account with one stupid fuck and that's it, the people that are there are your people. So every time it gets put in front of someone, it's getting 100% real engagement. And that is, it only boosts. So then the algorithm's going, this is content that it takes and excites and retains eyeballs. So
yes.
We push it further. And I think that's a huge benefactor to your
my stats are outrageous. I mean the amount of comments, the amount of likes. If you go into my YouTube studio, every single video I've ever produced is like, I think the lowest like to dislike ratio I have is like 99.4%, literally. And another thing that I do, by the way, for people who are wondering how I do what I do, I don't put up with any fighting, anger, hostility, or shittiness. Like, if anyone's shitty at all, they're just instantly blocked forever. And I'm very clear about that. Like, the first video on my course, I literally say that. The first 20 minutes is a whole disclaimer. Any bullshit, any shittiness, any fighting, block. It's not even like a conversation. There's not going to be any warnings. So super high engagement. And then if there is any weird shittiness, I squash it literally within hours, probably within 3 hours. Any fighting, bickering, everything squashed. I take the name of the person who's creating the issue, and I go on all the different social media platforms, and I try to find them, and I try to block them on everything I can, all at the same time. That way the problem doesn't pop up again. And if it does, they get pissed on another platform, and then they do it again, and then I block them there, and then they go on another platform, and I block them there, and then by the time they get through 5 or 6, then they're gone forever because they've exhausted that. YouTube's the same thing. If someone posts a nasty comment, you can click on the 3 bubbles in the Studio app on my phone, and you can go to hide content or hide user, delete comment, and hide user. What that does is it deletes the comment, and then it blocks that particular user from ever being able to comment on any of your material ever again. So it basically bans them from commenting on any of your videos permanently, that specific user, right? So I use that too. So I think that's another big thing that I think that so you pull up my stuff, and it's all good, feel good stuff all the way down. There's 800 plus comments, 99.8% like ratio, and over 20 minutes 22 minutes is my typical watch time. But then you go into like returning user stats, and that stat just means that they had to go and then they come back, because they do 22 minutes and then they leave and then they come back, and then they do 22 minutes and then they leave and then they come back. That's like the typical stat that I have. So That's sort of like the secrets behind how Brandon does what he does. I didn't necessarily design all this with this in mind. This just made sense to me when I was creating all this. So it wasn't like I was trying to figure out, like, how do I not get in trouble or banned or whatever. But the brand itself was created as a way to try to deflect and prevent any sort of like mainline media attack, like Channel 7 News, Channel 5 News. They're not going to come for a guy who calls himself one stupid fuck and dresses up in a mankini and calls himself a pickle. They're just not going to go after that guy. They can't. What are you going to do? So that was designed as a PR branding defense strategy, right? And then everything else, that was actually designed with an actual purpose, whereas everything else I've explained so far, that just kind of happened, and then I just kind of reaped the benefits. But I guarantee you, if I hadn't spent over $1 million on these various platforms, they'd be treating me differently, most likely. Even though I'm very good at staying away from hot topics, still, I have a feeling with all the cursing and all the craziness and the sexual innuendo and everything else, they'd be doing maybe something. I mean, maybe not, but, you know.
No, I think you're right, but at the same time, you've caught the wave, so ride it. I don't know if you could see the comments, but I'm reading
them
here.
Yeah, I can see them. Yeah, I can see them. We'll get into them. We'll get into them, but I'm going to start things off myself first. So
Please.
Anybody in the comments, just you know, it's a lot so far. I'm not going to be able to. Don't these people posting stuff from AI? Don't do that. That's going to piss me off. 900 pages of horse shit that I have to dig through. Most of it's going to be wrong. Don't post anything from AI, please, God. Okay, that's the first rule. We'll go from there, okay? So first and foremost, I want to say thank you for having me on the show. Even though you poked at me a little bit, I actually don't mind. I thought it was funny myself, like the guy who's all blue who's screaming, you know. I thought that was kind of fun.
Can I tell you, dude, when you yell, you looked, I'm just telling you, dude, in a delirium at 2 a.m., and you're like, that's just a little piece of me. That's just what I saw.
No, it's all good.
I'm a kid
I
that
don't
grew
give a
up a fan of Big Fat Liar. It wasn't personal.
I know.
I just saw.
If it was personal, I would have noticed. You know what I mean? If it's personal, that would have been. You know, I've gotten plenty of personal hater type material. There's a whole subreddit that's mostly about me. Sovereign Citizen subreddit. They talk about me like every 2 or 3 posts is about me. So I know haters. I know bullshit. I've got stalkers. Hater stalker guy who's a professor at the University of Kansas, and he looks like a giant penis. He's got no hair. He's been stalking me for over 2 years. So I know haters. Okay. So with that said, I want to say thank you for having me on the show. I want to say thank you for coming on this show. So just to give you a little background, so we are all trying to figure all of this out as pro se litigants, which it is beyond difficult. None of us are going to school, really. There are definitely lawyers. There is also law enforcement officers. There are politicians. Those names are going to stay secret. Those names are not going to be mentioned. There are various people who are on my stuff. I hear about new names all the time. A bunch of celebrities. Lots of celebrities have seen my stuff. Now, obviously, I understand the politics behind that. You know, you don't want someone who's some huge politician in some area of power who people know to say that he's learning about law from a guy on the internet named one stupid fuck who dresses up as a pickle that's inside of a mankini. And I understand that. I actually completely understand that concern. And that's why I promise them when I speak to them that I'm not going to be saying their name or doing anything, because I understand. As hilarious as it is, I actually get it. Okay. Now, with that said, we're all trying to understand minimally how to defend ourselves. That's not really what my platform is. I want to be an offensive platform because I think that's more unique. There's a lot of defensive-based platforms, like, for example, Matisse Academy. From everything that I've seen coming out of his stuff, his name is Amir. He has a lot of really good stuff involving defense and getting out of criminal charges and stuff like that. There's a lot of good information about that online. What there isn't a lot of good information on, and when I say isn't, there's almost none, is the offensive side of the equation. You get pulled over, your rights really are fucking completely trampled on, or something happens. And then what do you do to correct that wrong, get justice, and be compensated for that of which that you legally should be compensated for, right? That's kind of what my platform ultimately is in a nutshell. Yes, We do talk about defense. Yes, we can talk about defense, but it's like I try to stay away from that. I try to go offense. Even within defense, the way that I teach it is if you are sued, you should counterclaim immediately, as hard and as aggressively and as fast as you can. You want to get that counterclaim in. So that's kind of how I do it. And so I wanted to bring you on the show to sort of get a insider perspective. And this is not any sort of like debate or anything for anyone thinking that they're going to come in here and see us fucking flaming each other. That's not what this is. This is a internal look into an area that I don't think would necessarily be the easiest thing to have access to. I would imagine most clerks would never go on a show. They'd be too terrified. And I get an idea that most clerks are probably way more of the liberal mindset. And they would just, anything that has anything to do with anything that would question the system or go against the system or give pro se litigants anything would just be not something that they would feel comfortable getting involved in. So what we have here is we have a unique opportunity with someone who has become a major spinal cord of a court system, sort of like from my experiences seeing like dental offices and stuff, because I did a lot with dental offices and CPAs and lawyers' offices and stuff. The receptionist runs the whole goddamn office. So I can see a clerk of court kind of being that same thing that I've seen for so many years, right? Where you have the overworked, underpaid clerk, a receptionist doing 90% of all the work, and then the doctor or lawyer or professional doesn't realize it, and then they fire her or she gets sick, and then a week later they're dying and they're like begging for them to come back, and they're like freaking out and like gonna kill themselves, basically, right? I've seen it a million times. So with that said, you know, we're gonna have some questions in the chat box, so don't think that the question that you posted 5 minutes ago is gonna be something I'm gonna see, especially with fucking idiots posting 400 pages from AI, which is probably mostly false. You know, it takes a lot of time to go through and point out all the false things associated with AI, which I'm not going to waste my time. So with that said, let's start with just kind of like you started like law school and then clerk of court, and then let's just get your timeline in first. Let's start with that.
Sure. So first, the clerk as a position is either elected or appointed. And so in the jurisdiction that I'm at, it is appointed. Our chief of security says it to me all the time. This is a role that really should be elected, at which point I probably wouldn't have it, right? Because, you know, you'd have to go through a whole campaign. You'd probably have to have other experience in other sectors, or having clerk experience somewhere else.
Is there a pay gap between people who are elected?
There is.
If you're elected, is there like a huge pay bump?
I wouldn't say
like
it's huge. I wouldn't say it's huge because, again, the role is still equally significant. But at the same time, going back to that dialogue I have with our chief of security all the time, he's always like, this person, to operate their office, needs to be able to say no to the judge. No, this is what's best for our operation. But when you're appointed, you are at the will of the judge. And if you've got a mortgage, then you really got to toe that line. So something you point out.
Explain that more. So that's really crazy.
And I think I'll give you my timeline because that'll explain how I got here. Mm-hmm. So in college, my producer, ironically, his dad got me an internship, and it was really just glorified babysitting. I sat there and observed court and really didn't do any processing work. Then when I went to law school, I needed an internship program, and they were able to create an opportunity for me to do law work processing, creating judgment entries and processing work. It quickly evolved into me just kind of taking on a deputy clerk role, which is, like you were saying, receptionists. Those are the grunt workers that are making the whole thing tick, right? If you file something, when the police bring in a complaint, I mean, the saddest part is, and I feel the frustration of my clerks, right? So I'm the clerk, they're my deputies, and I feel their pain when we are the backstop and really babysitter for these police agencies. And we have to toe that line very tightly because we can't help them, right? So one of the things that's a major confusion for the public is
you can't help the prosecutors that work on behalf of the police.
So like when you come into our office and you're like, why can't you just tell me what to file? You guys don't believe us, and I don't blame you because humans are nefarious, and there are instances where you work with them every day and they help each other. But it's my job to make sure that we don't help the prosecutor or the police any more than we help the public that walks up to the window.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Do you have experience or connections or viewing into other zones or courts, or is everything that you're going to be talking about in this show kind of more insular?
No, what a beauty of where I am at, something that I take with great pride. The judge that is the administrative judge and in charge of the place. She's been there for like over 30 years.
Oh, wow, okay.
Where again, we can get lost in the weeds. We can debate her forever on an interpretation or an application, but it is astounding how much she just knows. I mean, she's got, like you, when I talk to you, it's like, whoa, there's an encyclopedia that is impressive. And one thing, she's a pride and joy of Ohio because we're the first paperless court in the state of Ohio. And so because that happened, in 2005, so now over 20 years, we've kind of been the tip of the spear for the state on technological evolution. So I'm in law school, June hits of 2020, and all of the law firms that I had potential jobs with are pulling it because it's the pandemic. And at the same time, this judge is longtime bailiff for like 15 years, and he was the clerk of court before this. He had an aneurysm, so she now needs a bailiff. And this isn't like the cop that stands next to the like you see in TV. That bailiff is our security bailiff. So like the chief of security I brought up, he's a bailiff, and he's in charge of the rest of our bailiffs. But a judge's personal bailiff is more like a legal secretary. That person will write judgment entries, will take care of the scheduling, will set the pre-trials, and maintain the schedule. The whole 9 yards, really maintain, like you said, the secretary, then therefore for the judge. So I kind of slide into that role because she needs a bailiff. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be the person that you'd call upon. I'm too young. I'm the youngest person to be a bailiff in this role. So she needs someone, and I excel beyond her expectations. At the same time, the clerk, we had this clerk who at the time was a magistrate. She's been a long time practicing attorney, absolutely brilliant. Well, she kind of outgrew the pants at our court and had an opportunity to be the clerk of court at juvenile court. So now she gets ripped out, and we just have kind of how government, this is a major downside to government.
So stop right there. Sorry.
Yeah, please.
So you have like an overarching administration above you, and they do like performance checks, and then it's sort of like a corporation. It's a corporate atmosphere where if you have really good performance checks, you get offered, and you get to be kind of like a crane from like a stuffed animal thing. You come down, they pick you up, and they'll say, hey. But they offer it to you, obviously. Hey, do you want to go to Washington, D.C., and you're going to get a $30,000 a month pay bump, and then you're going to get maybe part of your rent paid for or something. Is it kind of like that kind of a thing?
Well, that corporate structure is a good thing to make analogous to this because the clerk, therefore, would be like your CEO.
Okay.
And the judges are like the shareholders. You can't remove them, and they have the final say.
Well, it almost seems like if you were, I could be wrong, if you relate it to like a painting organization, the clerk is like the top dog. He's doing the scheduling, he's doing the payments, he's doing the inbound, he's doing the outbound, he's doing the phone calls, he's doing the making sure everything's good. He's kind of like the overall manager. And then the painter, the one who literally fucking paints, the whole point of the whole goddamn organization to begin with, would be the judge. Is that correct, or is that?
Well, that's not necessarily correct, because one thing I want to emphasize is how the clerk's office is supposed to be a completely separate entity that operates within within the court. And it is the court, but it's also its separate office. So like people will come to us and they'll go, I want to talk to the judge, or all we do is process what's filed with us. I'm in charge of any exhibits. So like if you file something with us, like a DVD that is going to be the exhibit
body cam footage.
Sure, body cam footage. Well, but I want something like your cell phone. You put on a flash drive. You've recorded the cop, your version of the video. You put it on a flash drive and you give it to me. If that goes out missing, that's 100% on me and my office. The judge sits there and goes, that's a failure of the clerk. And the prosecutor gets to go, that's a failure of the clerk. Another like major confusion, one great evolution that I got to experience at our court. One of the things that became a major problem, especially during the pandemic, is this exchange of evidence, right? So the prosecutor needs to get you body cam and get you the police report, and you want to get him whatever evidence you have, some pictures, whatever. We get together for the pretrial, and the prosecutor would go, I still need more time. The PD still hasn't put together the DVD, and the defense attorney hasn't picked it up, and that buys them another 3 weeks. And we would do this like 3 or 4 times before the judge finally implemented this thing called Case Center, where it's a FBI protected, and again, I know I have my doubts with that too, but it's an FBI protected online digital exchange for discovery. So now, as soon as we get a discovery request, the bailiff, which is separate from my office, the judge's personal bailiff, immediately opens up a case center case. You, the defendant, and we have it set up depending on each agency. It could be the prosecutor, it could be a combination of the prosecutor and law enforcement, but they also immediately get an email. We can audit it to show exactly when everybody received their email, exactly when everybody opened their email, and then everybody, instead of all this running around, you just upload it there, and we could pull it up right there in court.
So hold on. So a discovery request. Now I let's just back up a little bit. So I have been trying like hell just to get past like a 12b6, which would be like on the state side, motion for dismissal for failure to state a claim for which relief can be granted, which is complete fucking bullshit. Absolutely infuriating. It literally, I wanted to like die or kill for like 6 months. Now I'm starting to come up and out of that. I'm trying as hard as I can to figure that out. I think I'm finally starting to get a little bit of traction. I've never even gotten far enough to get into discovery. Now, I know that sounds a bit sad, but the truth is that every single one of my cases is some kind of like gigantic financial institution, banking institution, or the government itself, and it's for millions and millions of dollars. And frankly, I set the bar really, really high and just went straight for the fucking moon. And so the fact that I haven't really gotten anywhere yet is okay with me, and it makes sense. But my haters run around and laugh because they're like, oh, he's never won anything. He's never gone anywhere. And then Joey Kimbrough, my right-hand man, he was like, dude, should we do some like smaller cases and see if we can? I'm like, fuck that, bro. Hell no. I want $3 million, government buildings. I want to kick in doors. I'm just going to keep doing this for years until I finally figure it out. I'm okay with the difficulty level. It's like playing fucking The Last of Us 2 and putting it on nightmare difficulty. Hey, look, I'll tell you right now, every single scene, it might take me 200 or 300 attempts to get through one little scene. But I'll tell you right now, I'm getting through that scene 200, 300, 400 times. I'm through that scene. I'm on to the next one. That next one might take me 200 or 300 times to get through that scene. But I'm getting through it, and then I'm on to the next one, and then I'm doing 200 or 300 there, and then I'm on to so I just have a different processing mentality as term to this. So with that said, my knowledge of discovery is it's more of a private request than a public request, meaning it's sort of like a meet and confer where, I'm going to be requesting these various things for discovery privately. And then sort of like what gets filed into the docket or what gets filed into the lawsuit is sort of like just basically just compliance documentation stating that what was occurring in the private was completed or whatnot until there's a certain point when you actually move into discovery. But it seems like discovery is one of those things that's like mostly private and it only moves into the public arena if there's like non-compliance or something like that. So can you tell me more about that?
Well, so I guess it depends on it. We know this is a sticky wicket for Pickletown, but it comes into how you're defining like public and private, because technically discovery, like that's why with these Diddy cases and everybody, there's all this talk about just wait there, or what's the one with Ryan Reynolds and his wife? Those cases, like right now, the Ryan Reynolds one is bending over discovery, and now that the judge approved the disposition of Taylor Swift and the discovery release of her text messages, there is a high anticipation that they're going to dismiss the case and try to settle, or Ryan Reynolds is going to try to settle with that, the guy, because there's so much pressure from Taylor Swift and they're so desperate for trying to save their relationship with her. Those text messages would become public. Like, even if they never actually get to a trial and get to submit it as an exhibit, the second it's a part of discovery, somebody technically can do a records request for, but oftentimes, depending on if it's a high-profile case, right, like the Taylor Swift case, the judge may be able to hold that until the conclusion of the case, and so you may not be able to have access. But at some point, that's why corporations fear discovery in such a high regard. If you get to the point of discovery, can I tell you my personal one? I desperately want somebody, like we should all do a class action against YouTube, and we should sue YouTube because you are selling me on the fact that my engagement and use of your platform, right? Like think of an amusement park, Cedar Point. You're giving me a ticket to ride YouTube. And you're telling me my ticket accesses the same platform as Brandon Joe Williams, as Good Mythical Morning, as Fail Army. Pick YouTube's favorite channels. You're telling me, because this is where the conspiracy theories of they all think they're shadow banned. Look at that poor girl, Stephanie. How does she have a video worth 120,000 views, and then she's got the same channel I do? 50, 100, 200, 10. How does that make sense to anybody? I guarantee if we opened up a class action lawsuit, then therefore freezing and forcing them to disclose, because right now it's not open source. They're telling us every user is getting the same platform. However, I imagine upon a discovery exchange, we'd know immediately that no, certain users are getting a different platform compared to others, and that would be the value of discovery. Is it if I'm forced to accept whatever you give me, right? Like if YouTube goes no, and this is what we get. If we get some PI, some investigator to prove they then cheated and through discovery submitted a lie or destroyed the evidence or
Perjury.
Altered the algorithm, that's a felony. Now
perjury.
You've got someone cooked.
Yeah, so I think one thing that needs to be clarified here is the difference between criminal discovery versus civil discovery. I think that's kind of
Right.
what we've. I think that's where we failed to kind of bridge that. So I think you're talking about criminal discovery, and I think I'm talking about civil discovery. I think that's the difference here.
True. And again, in a case
civil discovery is like I can send a civil discovery request at the very beginning of a lawsuit. Doesn't mean they need to follow it. But then after we get through the flurry of motions and stuff, then I can motion the court into discovery, and then we're in discovery in a civil case.
Correct.
From my experience. Now, I only do civil because I'm all negotiable instruments. That's all I do. I don't do anything else.
That makes sense.
So I only do securities, and I'm probably going to stay that way because that's where my knowledge is, and that's where the money's at. Obviously, that is money. So the thing is that my understanding of discovery is you can send a discovery request whenever you want, but they don't really need to do much with it until the court is motioned into discovery. But then even after that point, discovery is sort of done privately, and the only time you really go into the court is like if they're not complying with the requests. So it becomes this sort of like seesaw public-private situation, but what people don't realize is that until at some point in the future, the evidence that's being dug out from the private discovery requests are somehow put on the record, they're basically private up until that point. Whereas with criminal, I think it's totally different, but I don't understand the criminal part of it all.
So, well, and again, really what you've got your finger on is when the court's enforcement comes into play. But it isn't that it doesn't exist. So like in a criminal case, again, that's why criminal charges... Because here's the problem. Like, again, I'm kind of walking in different directions in my head on how to answer that. Because the carte blanche on its surface, if there's a criminal case with discovery, you have access to it. You do. But the problem begins when expensive attorneys are able to compel the court to show that for social purposes, to ensure that the trial doesn't get,
When I upload documents on Pacer, you can literally click the little box, public or private. There's a fucking little drop down.
And so wait, where are you filing? What kind of court are you filing this at?
Well, that would be district court. It'd be federal court because it's Pacer. Pacer's federal.
So again,
but I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that on the state login system. You guys are the oldest paperless system in the state, so you guys would know your e-filing. Did you have a drop down that says something like that on your e-filing?
So here's the thing: a municipal court isn't trying felony cases, right? So if we get a felony case, all of that gets bound over to downtown, to a higher, appellate or higher common pleas, Cuyahoga County. It's going to a higher court.
Okay.
And part of the problem, answering your question, is like everything we deal with is accessible by the court or by the public unless it has a social security, which at that point it could just be redacted, or if it has a minor's name, which again oftentimes just refers to them as a victim and would still be able to be released. So there isn't much, if anything, that isn't accessible, and when they aren't, it's by like a direct order, because it would get public backlash. It would, tamper with the justice of the trial.
And just to stop on this point for 1 second, because this is really
Please.
important. I have a lot of people on my side of the equation, people who have probably never filed a lawsuit to save their life, saying like, they just hide everything, or they privatize everything, or they do this, or they do that. I've never actually seen that happen. Myself, I've never actually personally with my own two eyes seen anything get privatized, redacted, or hidden from anything I've ever seen. So that, to me, that's a false conspiracy theory from my experiences so far, because I've never seen, in fact, from all the information that I've collected, it's almost impossible to privatize anything. And the only thing I've ever seen that is privatized or redacted is like these crazy ass JFK assassination FBI type situations where there's the black lines through everything, but that's like 1 in a trillion type situation, once every 30 or 40 years, something like that comes out. Besides that, and obviously that's fucked and nefarious, and that's obviously there's something wrong with that, because that just doesn't make any sense. But besides that, I've never seen it personally, just to be clear on that to all the audience.
So one little side story I want to give, because we're talking about discovery. One of the little anecdotes I was hoping to give you after getting an idea of what we were talking about, and this seems to be a perfect time. I had a gentleman that came up to the window talking about this case center, right? And he's insistent that there is a video that the prosecutor has, and he hasn't put it on case center. And he's screaming at me at the window. He's yelling at me that, and this is where the public confusion kicks up more dust, only harming kind of like the preservation of true justice. Because this person is under the belief that the system's against him. And I'm sitting here as the neutral party that you file with, and really is the only person that has the interest of like making sure what you're trying to accomplish gets done. And so he's yelling at me because there's a video that the prosecutor has, and if he were to upload it, his case is over. It's over. And that's why he's not uploading it. And so I'm trying to explain to him, sir, please either put it in writing right now with me that there is a video that you are still looking for, and it gets filed and put right on the case. It goes right to the judge. Yeah. Or it's showing that you have a hearing here in 4 days. I swear to goodness itself, if you bring that up to the judge, because here's the problem, and I'm not going to say that grayness doesn't exist. In the public's eyes, they go, look it, the judges and the attorneys, they all hang out, they all go to the same clubs, they're all friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's this...
And the bar card thing, too.
Right. So there's this preconceived notion that if the prosecutor's doing wrong and I raise it to the judge is going to give the benefit to the prosecutor because they're buddies. And I'd be ignorant to pretend that doesn't exist in a very human world. But I also want to emphasize the mechanism en masse works to some respect, because that isn't most cases. And so I'm pleading with this guy, please just bring it up to the judge. But he's so convicted in the system being poisoned that he has no faith in just going through the steps. And if I could advocate to any of your audience listeners, if there's one takeaway from a Brandon Joe Williams, it's if you play their game, if you take the steps, you can beat them at their chess game. But the problem is you get so frustrated because you don't know the steps or you don't have faith that the steps will work that you don't take any of the steps and then the whole thing malfunctions. So I'm looking at this guy wholeheartedly. Human to human. I'm pleading with you right now. I'm telling you, you raise that to the judge. I know how this plays out.
There'll be an enlargement of time. Minimally, it'd be an enlargement of time. Let me give you 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Minimally. I mean, if I've seen a lot of court cases in a situation like that, it would be, hey, sir, what if I gave you 2 or 3 weeks? Oh, that would be, and it's funny, too, because I've seen a lot of times, too, where they're angry and they're screaming and the judge goes, well, sir, what if I gave you 2? And they just calm right down. Oh, well, and they're just like, they're so angry they won't even allow it because they're so angry and they think it's so evil and they think everyone's after them. They think there's some kind of nefarious aspect to why she's giving you 2 or 3 weeks. I've seen that. So I've seen a lot of shit. Not as much as you have, but I've seen a lot of shit. Well,
the other one. So you're not, and you're in agreement that of course there's that human element of they share a bar card. They're buddies. At the same time, the human element is also there. People also don't like all people. So I also experienced where the judge is sitting here completely frustrated with an incompetent prosecutor that's only got that gig because he's trying, he's got his private practice, but he needs health insurance, and he's only giving, surface level production. And so the judge is chomping at the bit for you to come in and identify that this prosecutor still hasn't given me you. So as much as sometimes, there's a judge that'll go, that's my pal. There's also a judge going, please give me the rope to hang the guy that isn't doing his job.
Yeah. Do you do you have experience with both conservative and liberal judges, or are you mainly around liberal judges? Or I know you have extensive histories too, so I don't know if maybe they go back and forth or they shift in their kind of mindset, because over 30 years, people can have huge political shifts in 30 years. It's not really, especially in today's world. So what is your and then also male female as well. I like to also hear about male versus female would be a great demographic question as well.
Things that I pray an audience stays long enough for the couple years from now when I take my departure, because I have a book, right, of there's cases I look forward to buying the video records of. There's commentary I can't necessarily give you in its entirety. However, my uncle was a judge locally as well. And, we kind of snicker at the fact that this guy out of law school was a Republican, staunch Republican. And the jurisdiction that he was in needed a judge and they are a Democrat jurisdiction or a Democrat-dominated jurisdiction. So they went to him and said, you could be the judge, we'll support you, but you got to be a Democrat. So he switches to be a Democrat, and now he's been on that road for so long, and he's so entrenched that, like, he's fully drinking the Kool-Aid. So a guy that started his career in one direction, you know, will defend men in female sports. Why? Not because it makes sense, but because that's his team and he's been on it forever. And there's a real dialogue to be had here, which is that these people should not be politically driven. It's twofold. You either shouldn't be politically driven, and then you can be reserved in whatever you do or think. Or if you're going to be politically driven, then I should be allowed. There shouldn't be any fear on coming on a show like this, because then I should have an opportunity to know how you really think, what makes you tick, what are the things that you're using to logically evaluate truth and justice. So the problem is you have people that get entrenched in political teams that support them throughout these long, strenuous campaigns, and at the same time they get to stay reserved in their little ideological bubbles and never have to truly show to the public a challenge or exemplify their abilities, because they're promulgated by a political system that has them protected and financially motivated. Now, how do I experience in our court? When I was an intern and when I was the personal bailiff, it was two females of the same political party. And
okay, so
this
that's
is
like
one
a
of
very
those stories.
specific.
This is one of those reflections where I try to tread lightly, because
No, I get it. I get that.
they hated each other. And
Wow,
it
okay.
was
That's even more
exactly
interesting.
what you should expect on why, right? I'm not going to draw upon that.
That's
Any
a
other-
very, I don't think, I would imagine there are not very many districts anywhere, state or federal, where you have two female Democrat judges at odds with one another. That's almost like, because at the federal level, it's almost all male. The first time I ever, there's one female judge that I've dealt with in a federal case. She's actually a senior judge. She's been doing it for like 50 years. She's actually semi-retired. But everybody else has been male.
I would be lying if I didn't concede that there were instances where I saw an application of a law applied differently, not because that's the best or most accurate application, but because it's the opposite of what she's doing. And, you know, it's an infectious mindset, and it only kind of snowballs on itself. It becomes competitive. It becomes a problem.
What I do in my federal cases is I use the canons. I use the canons to try to control that to the best of my ability. And then I basically, this is kind of new. We've been doing this for like maybe 3 or 4 months. We use the canons to sort of like almost put up like a if you don't do this, it's going to be a duty breach damages itself, and we're going to go to the Court of Federal Claims as well as appeals. So there's 2 different angles that we'll push on that. Not to try to get the judge to be biased in our favor, just to try to get him to be unbiased, literally.
Right. So then the evolution from there, one of the judge's daughters was sick and medical issues, so she had gone to the state and removed herself as judge about 1.5 years before the end of her term. When that happens, the governor gets to appoint the judge. Of course, the governor is a Republican, and there are 9 jurisdictions within our court. About half, or now the majority of them, are Republican. So the governor goes to the mayors within our jurisdiction to get, you know, your prosecutors, attorneys within your system that you would like to see representing your jurisdiction. The mayor of one of the more prominent Republican jurisdictions went to school and was very close with our governor, and he had pushed to have that city's prosecutor appointed. So that prosecutor was appointed to become the judge to fill in that role, finished the 1.5 years, and then 2 Novembers ago now, ran again for re-election, and by the skin of his teeth got it, which is a big deal because there's never been Republican judges in this court. While the majority of the jurisdictions are Republican, the jurisdiction that the court is actually in is a low-income, highly Democratic city, and so they've kind of controlled the the weather there. Getting back to kind of how I ended up there, because that kind of gets back to like my relationship with my job, I guess. At the time of taking on the bailiff, the clerk of court that filled in the role of the old clerk, who again was a magistrate, like highly competent. She moves on, and we just look at the supervisor of the deputy clerks, and he was being groomed to take on that role anyway. But we come to find out, this dude has been gambling and fucking off his whole tenure at the court. We audit his computer to come to find out he's just a total jack off. So we had to let him go in the means of him like failing at his job, but before discovering all these problems. There's all these fires going on a daily basis, and this dude was nothing but a fire alarm, yelling problems, whereas me and our tech administrator were just tackling them. Like, dude, just get it done. You're doing more work crying about the problems. And I did that to such a degree that the judge kind of phased him out and then just eventually made me the clerk. So this then coming full circle back to, it's an appointed role. I'm in charge of an office, of all of its employees, the building itself, the other departments, so probation department, security, if there's, like, again, an intruder, those types of issues. It's crazy when here's a little story, I guess. We had a guy go to the police. We're on the second floor, and the first floor is the police station. And we had a guy come into the police station with a knife. And, unfortunately, it seemed like one of those instances where he's looking for assisted suicide. So he's in the lobby, he's waving a knife, and there's back steps that go from the court directly to the police station, really to the jail, because, if we take somebody from the courtroom, that's how they take them straight down.
Okay.
So there's all this commotion. All the clerks, all the hens in the hen house are going crazy. They're like, what's going on outside? There's like 10 cop cars. They've all got guns pointed at our office windows. We're like, what's going on? And I'm just a nosy Nancy, so I go to the stairs, and I'm just like watching one of the craziest scenes. It's like TV. And it's after a few minutes of like yelling, and again, this is like daytime TV drama. I'm like, I'm supposed to be in charge of like all the people and keeping everyone calm. Like, I have to remind myself, like, that's my role. So I had to leave and go make sure everybody's calm and everybody sticks to protocol, because, every day is a totally new, and I think that's the only thing that's got me coming back, because some of these days are such a tragedy. And one last piece I want to give you in regards to serving the public. The part that really shakes your heart and, makes me have nothing but kudos and value for what you and your people do is when these people come into the court and they've had a warrant for 20 years and you just showed up to file your stuff, and they're leaning into you like, these and I tell you, they lose all my shit and blah, blah, blah. Like, they're talking up how shitty we are. Well, 10 times out of 10, that motherfucker has had a warrant for 20 years, has never once thought about making things right, showing up to court, but now he wants to drive to Cincinnati to see his homies, and today's the day. And he's pissed because, well, they're not moving quick enough. So I leave you with this. The thing that shakes our hearts but also kind of helps us when we get somebody like you is we tend to want to help people more than they want to help themselves. That is, I have to remind myself I am at the epicenter of bad people. Because so quickly it becomes you internalize it like it's a reflection of the community, and it's like no, I don't work at the grocery store. We're not selling happiness here. So you have to remember that like we're dealing with things that upset people, so they're justified in some respect. But then also there's times where we're trying to bend over backwards to get you out of your situation, get you back on your feet, and get you out of here, because we don't want you coming back either.
Well, let me ask on that point. Like my right hand man Joey Kimbrough, he's won a bunch of cases in the credit space, and then in like basic damages case, breach of contract, and that's kind of how we got together. That's how he had already been doing litigation related stuff for a couple of years. and he was the one who kind of springboarded me. I knew a lot about the negotiable instruments and stuff, and then he was the one who knew about procedure and how to file and how to do motions and stuff. I didn't know anything about that until I met him. He is not a kind of person who is much of a naysayer. He has never been into conspiracy theories. A lot of my audience is very conspiracy theory heavy. They watch conspiracy theory shows. Most of the shows I've been on are about or involving conspiracy theories. Joey Kimbrough is not at all in that category, not even in the slightest. He's just a normal guy who wanted to learn the court system. He didn't even know about all the person definition and all this stuff and all these different sole proprietor. He didn't know about any of that. He just learned the local rules. He learned the rules of evidence. He filed his motions. He did his things, and he won his cases. Period. End of story. Right? Now, he is of the mind, and he's told me many times, that the courts don't really like to see pro se litigants there. They're annoying. They're awful. They're shitty. And it's just like, oh, God, here we go. Here's another one, rolling your eyes. What sort of response would you have to someone saying that to you? And if that is true, what kind of experiences are you experiencing that has created that sort of attitude toward these sorts of litigants?
Love that question. Love that question. One thing I want to just throw to you, if you recall when we did our podcast, there's one little section, because that's the first time we ever spoke or met each other. There's one little moment, not in the episode, where I talk about somebody of the sovereign citizen type that pretty much shook the system, and I got to have a front row seat to it. Here's what the difference is. Nobody's ever going to have a frustration with that guy, because that guy comes in with 6 motions. He already knows what he's doing, and he already knows what he's trying to accomplish. The sad part is that guy is bundled in with 20 people that are in your audience, right, that think they know what they're doing but really don't. And then that group is bundled in with 100 uneducated morons. Like, I think that what gets lost on the people is, like, we're at the epicenter of bad people. Every person that walks in that door is they're ready to lie, they don't know what they're doing, and really they're digging their hole deeper just personally, whatever they're doing. And the problem is, those people may not even call themselves sovereign citizens but they're asking a clerk that doesn't know, what should I file here? So one, that clerk gets in legal trouble if they tell you, because I can't tell the prosecutor what to file, and we got to keep strict to that. So if I can't tell the state what to file, I really can't guide you on what to file. Now, have we learned ways about it for people that are, trying their best, how to kind of guide them in ways without giving them advice?
Real quick on this, because this is so important. In LA, there are so many pro se at the federal court. They have pro se clinics. Dude, right by where I filed I went into the federal court because I was like, you know what? I want to go down there. I'm going to go up and down the elevator. I'm going to say hi to the security guards. I'm going to meet some people. I'm walking down this hallway to go down to where the filing area is. And as I'm walking down the hallway, I'm looking every fucking door. I want to see, what are these doors? What are these? Bankruptcy, first door. Next door, federal pro se clinic. Next door was the filing center. And I'm like, and I took a picture and I sent it to my audience. I go, here you go, bitches.
Here, can I give you, I took a sociology course in college, and the professor broke it down perfectly. Everything is measured in man hours. A CEO is worth millions of dollars because he owns thousands and thousands of man hours. Your coffee is worth $5 because it's just a portion of a man hour. All of that comes down to an evaluation of a value. Everything has a value. And so here's the problem. 90% of the people walk into my counter and they're not willing to exhaust one of 2 types of value. Either have the money to go confer with a legal expert. Maybe not in your world an attorney, but somebody that can guide you. That takes time, that takes money, that people are not willing to give. Or exhaust the other means of value, time, which is Go learn for yourself. Like, what is the one thing Brandon Joe Williams exemplifies here totally? The information's out there. You either need to go. Here's what's not going to deliver.
I've never even gone to a clinic. And if I would have went to a clinic, it probably would have. This wouldn't have taken me as long. It wouldn't have taken me a goddamn year to figure out. I was probably one of those people that was too cocky to just go down to the motherfucking clinic. Honestly, frankly.
Dude, if you've got a lady that's paid $20 an hour who doesn't have a legal, all her understanding is how this gets to where it needs to go, right? I got to scan it on the case. It's got to go on the docket, and who it needs to go to. Got to make sure it gets to all the parties, and then it ends up with the judge. As long as it gets, that's her checklist. She's not a legal expert. She didn't go into debt $150,000 and spend 3 years learning what you need to file. And so here, again, how do you get that information? You certainly don't get it badgering that woman going, well, if you just told me, and then calling her 20 times.
What is it on this subject? The exact terminology on this subject is called legal advice. The clerks can't give what? Legal advice. Now, let me ask you this, because this is, I don't feel like we're going, I feel like we're actually on the same, I'm just going deeper on this exact same thing that we're on right now, but I'm trying to bring it back and clarify it and pin it down. Why is it that the clerk can't give legal advice, but the woman, I'm assuming it's mainly female, the woman who runs the state or federal pro se clinic borderline can or does? I have a lot of reports where people go to the federal pro se clinic or the state pro se clinic, and then this is the experience they experience, which is even more a reason why you should go. There's no one there. And then they wind up with 2 or 3 sometimes very attractive women, which again, I'm like, okay, I'm going down to the clinic. I should have gone a long time ago.
True.
And they're helping you, and they're so like wanting to help, and they're so like over the fucking hill to help that like they kind of look around like this, and then they're giving procedural advice, and then they kind of like whisper in your ear about something that maybe they shouldn't. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I hear about, but they're so eager to help. It's very different than.
Can I explain why?
Because it seems like the clerk is like overwhelmed, has 9 million people coming, there's too much bullshit, and then you go to the pro se clinic, there's no one there. There hasn't been anyone there for 4 months. So like it just supply and demand, it makes sense to me. But please, if you could talk about that.
First off, every person we try to push to go to legal aid or these pro se litigant clinics, and again, lead the horse to water, none of them want to drink, and yet they're all dying of thirst.
Does no one go to these things? Is it really that bad?
They're crickets. I mean, it kind of comes back to like us in like content creation. Getting people to a second digital location is so hard, let alone literally getting ass in seats. But again, we got to recognize the demographic of who we're talking about, right? Like $5 for gas is crippling them. Their rig probably isn't reliable enough to get them to the center of downtown. Then I got to pay for parking. Like there are enough hurdles, and the people. And again, I'm only a municipal court, so I'm a low enough rung that the majority of these people are indigent. The people that need this money are indigent, and they're not really able to seize those opportunities. But twofold why I think ours is overrun and theirs are empty, but also why they're so much more willing to help and we really can't be. One, my whole role is to preserve neutrality between the state and the person in front of us, the defendant, that the state is really reaching over their liberty and grabbing. As a libertarian type, my whole goal is to preserve that as much as possible. That's what the system promises us, and that's what we owe. So that's really the goal of our role in our clerk's office, and that's supposed to be the oath of office for all the other clerks as well. We're supposed to be neutral. So if I'm giving you advice, I need to be giving the prosecutor advice. Now, what happens to a world where I give you wrong advice? Now I'm legally liable. So we've walked this road over centuries of litigation to where we don't have a clerk's office that gives legal advice, because if they give you the wrong legal advice, liability opens itself up. And we want to try to preserve that neutrality as much as possible. Whereas legal aid, pro se litigant clinics, these are, one, they're barred. So and again, we know that's just a dog on a leash, but when you get that card, it's also a contractual agreement that anytime I give advice to a person now, and that's why, like, when I walk into a space like this talking to you, I'm not giving anybody legal advice. I'm not in a place to give legal advice because I never passed the bar. So that is an emphasis I have to carry with me, because an attorney, if I carry myself out to give you advice and that I passed the bar.
Well, no one knows what legal advice even means definitionally, but yes, continue.
Well, and again, I think for the sake of
legal advice means the legal definition of legal advice is advice as regards to a person's personal, actual legal situation.
No, you're right. You're
not
100% right.
Generalized information, procedural information, or I saw a guy one time who did this. None of that is actually legal advice. The problem is nobody knows any of these definitions. Nobody knows any of these things. They think that if I say anything that could be anything associated with anything legal, it's legal advice. And you've got all these guys, these gurus that are going around, and they always start their videos, this isn't legal advice. Well, it never was to begin with, you stupid fuck. You don't know what you're even talking about. You never see me talking about I don't give legal advice, because if you don't realize that I'm not giving legal advice already from the video I'm doing, you're fucking retarded. Fuck you. You shouldn't even be here. That's how I do it.
At the same time, you're not coming to the person that's getting the audience, wherever they're at. You're not coming to them from a position of authority where your advice can be taken with liability. I say it like, I have to say I'm not giving you legal advice, because even if I give you something like, okay, my case is at the pretrial stage, what do I do next? Well, if I give you
any legal advice,
if I go, well, if I don't tell you what you should do, but I say the options available to you are A, B, and C, and I forget D, I am opening myself. The court has now opened itself up to, now in the courtroom, if you didn't know about D, and D was a liberating defense, you go to the judge and you go, whoa, your clerk told me A, B, and C, never D, and now we've disrupted justice because we've inserted ourselves inappropriately. Yeah. So the best bet, and that's why, again, let's keep it grounded to like our perspective. The frustration's always going to be, I look at what I invested time and money-wise to have an idea of how the system works by going to law school. And then I'm looking at people that aren't putting in any of that investment, and they're going, well, I don't want to pay $5,000 for an attorney. I don't want to spend 3 years reading these books and $100,000 going to the school, so I'm pissed that you won't tell me the answer. And the reality is, you're not willing to make any sacrifice or investment into this, but you're me. You're asking expecting this free, I would call it legal advice or legal representation. But going back to the legal aid person, that person has now taken the bar, so they have to pass.
They have bar cards? All the people in the clinics, all federal and state, all have bar cards?
Hold on. You might have somebody at a clinic that is a law student that has applied through the state to give some legal guidance under the supervision of a barred attorney. So then again, there's always going to be a line of liability a bar card.
It's not all. You're saying that the people who are underneath those people would be ultimately still connected to the person above them with the bar card, and if they fuck around and find out too much, it's going to come back to the person that. So it's sort of it's almost like a apprenticeship program, basically.
1,000%.
They're all tied together. Okay.
In our law school.
I didn't know that. It's good to know. That's a great thing to know.
So that those people are like us. They're people that want to help people, and they have a mechanism that has insurance that will give them liability protection, and they have the heart that we're the defenders of the people. This is like the community's Avengers. They're here to educate you and give you advice where the system can't, and they have the financial protection through liability insurance to give you that advice. And yeah, if it's some 24-year-old kid in law school that guided you a little bit wrong, well, then we have insurance that could cover that.
Okay.
And correct your situation, restitution.
And the clinics, are the clinics underneath the court? Is it like a sub?
No, that's another major piece. It's totally separate, right? Because
so it's in the same building, but it's like a separate corporate entity, maybe, or something?
Here's what's funny. That's why the beauty of these things is they're so localized. I'm learning now from our dialogue, yours is in the same building. Ours isn't. Ours.
Okay. So
we don't
let's
have it
back
in
up.
our building, and we have a whole
the federal one was in the same building. There was literally a door, and it had a thing on it. Now, the Superior Court of the state had a whole huge monster fucking board, and it had all these. Okay, the state court is like a madhouse. The state court in California, the Superior Court in downtown Los Angeles, is like absolutely batshit insane. It smells. It's fucked. There's 400 trillion people, okay? The federal courthouse in downtown LA is this like pristine, super clean, and there ain't a goddamn fucking person anywhere in the whole building. It's two totally different worlds, okay? And I went down there just because I wanted to, like, what's going on and what's happening.
No, it is. It's a ghost
town. How do I fucking, So the state courthouse is 8 floors of madness and just everything. It smells like fucking shit. Now, you know what I did was I dressed up like a lawyer. I put on a suit. I had a handkerchief. I shaved my head, my neck, hair, everything. I had a little leather briefcase, the whole thing. And I walked. I had these nice leather shoes. I cleaned them. And I walked. I go up the escalator, first floor, up the escalator, second floor, back across, up the escalator, because there's 2 sides with 2 escalators on both sides. Third floor, up the escalator, fourth floor. And all the lawyers were like this. Because they're all wearing like navy blue with a simple tie, white shirt, button up, and then they have the leather that like is some form of brown. I don't know what it is about brown. Even black wasn't really very common. Now, they were clean and pressed and everything, but the color was very, very monotonous overall from all the lawyers. I go in there with mint green pickle style, right? I go in there with the gray handkerchief hanging out and this fucking crazy thing. I got a fucking big Gucci belt. I got this fucking Gucci belt right here. I got a fucking Gucci belt. I got this crazy ass leather woven black, and then I have this almost Christmas themed red checkered socks that come up, and it's just like fucking like, here I am, bitch. And like all the fucking lawyers were all like, damn, who's this fucking wild Westerner coming up in here? And they were all like, what's up, dude? Good to see you. And they all thought I was lawyers. And all the fucking people there thought I was a lawyer. And all I was doing was just walking up through the different levels, trying to figure out what's going on and how does this work. And I was super nervous because everyone was looking at me, and I'm like, I wasn't expecting this. Like, okay, this is kind of like, so I did that, and I went down there. And the thing is it's like, it's a whole shabam. So I saw the difference between the state and the federal. So back to the question, I saw this huge board, and it had all this pro se clinic this and pro se clinic that, and a lot of the things, if I remember correctly, I could try to check my pictures. I took a lot of pictures. Most of the pro se clinic stuff that I saw on the state level was being held at the local library or law library or online in some sort of Zoom. I don't remember if I saw anything necessarily where the clinics were done in the actual state superior courthouse. I could be wrong on that.
No, but that would sound accurate. And even if it was, that would be the court allowing whatever aiding department, agency, whoever's representing it. It could be even just a coalition of attorneys that want to help the public. Whoever's doing it may just be doing it under the permission of the court. But I'd be very surprised if it was actually, because again, that would be quid pro quo. Like, you can't have, and the list of Latin terms, but you can't have conversations with the judge or the court where both parties aren't present. So if you're guiding the defendants without the prosecutor present, then it's an illegal proceeding.
Because,
so you'll never have
they
the
have
court
to be able to object to anything that comes up. Fuck, I never even thought of that. This is the simplest thing in the world. I can't believe it. I've never thought of that. Wow. That makes perfect fucking sense. Jesus Christ. So if they can't talk unless you're there, and you can't talk unless they're there.
Really, just think about it. How you're, the attorney in fact, and like how you represent it. The attorneys that, or even just the, let's say, students or apprentices that are putting on those clinics or giving that guidance. The takeaway is, one, they're an unofficial. Like they may be an official capacity for you, representing you, but they're not an official agent of the court or the state. And really, it's like Brandon Joe Williams giving you the legal guidance on what to file or anything. This is just some actor, whoever's financing it, representing it, scheduling it, coordinating it, that's moot. All we care about is that this is a person putting on this clinic, and the thing that I can assure you is that they are removed from the court as some sort of even we have a victim advocate who is, this is as close to that line as I'll say I could conjure up that we might get. As close to that line as we get is we employ a victim advocate, which now by statute is so far from needed. In Ohio, we just passed a statute that requires the prosecutor to be fully liable of making sure the victim is aware of all court notices, and if they want to be heard or present, that they ensure that the victim is given that opportunity. That obligation used to be on the court. And so the court then, we had a victim advocate that would check up on every case, check and see if there's any victims on that case, and then get in contact with those victims to hunt down the fact that they don't come back later after the fact and go, whoa, 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 I wanted to be heard. So we have a victim advocate that advocates for victims, goes and hunts them down, finds out, do you actually want to be a party to this? And when they do, they make sure they get notice of all the hearings, make sure that they have access to the court, whether it be via Zoom or coming in person. So, but that victim advocate is a removed entity. While we do employ him on our payroll, he does not have the access to the judge to impact the case, doesn't have access to the prosecutor to really, if you want to think about it, because really it's just paid by the city, his payroll is paid for by the city. If anything, he's a representative for the prosecutor. The prosecutor has this obligation, and really, how does the prosecutor build this case? The prosecutor uses the victim's testimony, and the evidence the victim has. So this victim advocate is really just a liaison from the victim to the court and to the prosecutor, and making sure that the judge, making sure they can assure the judge that this person, whether if they're not there, they don't want to be there, or if they are there, they have their chance to be heard. I know that was a long-winded one about the victim advocate, but that's the only weird type of role. Everything else is, we're the clerk's office is just the processing hub. The judges, we are walled off from them. We really don't even have direct access to them physically. I obviously have to operate under the directions of them, so I have access to them a lot more, but the deputy clerks almost never see them. They operate separately. The judge gives us direction on how she wants her dockets to look, how,
the standing order stuff, all the standing order stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So at the beginning of a case, there's a standing order that's filed, and it's actually sent via mail, actually, to pro se litigants. And it's basically like how the judge likes her sector to be, her in his case, but or he in a male's case,
or they can do whatever they want. Come on
God, I don't think I've ever heard of a fucking they them judge. That would be a whole new. But even in California, I don't think there's any they them.
Crash a plane, but can you crash a court?
Oh God. So standing orders is basically let's give some examples. So you have the local rules, and then you have the court rules that the judge, like I'm in a few. I've been in 3 or 4 different federal courtrooms. The guy that I'm in now, he seems to be the most. How do I say this? He seems to be the most militant. And when I say militant, I want to define that as he wants everything tied down. He doesn't want. He doesn't even have a phone number for the clerk. It's only an email. That was unique.
Oh, wow.
If there's no changing of any meetings or hearings. If the hearing is there, it's there, and if it's not there, then there'll be a text thing on it. Like, he has that shit locked down. Like, you do not fuck around. Gary Klossner, I believe, it's the SBA case that I'm in. Mr. Fitzgerald was another case I was in. He's an openly gay man. In fact, he is the chairman of the Federal Bar LGBTQ Committee. He had a looser system as to how he ran his courtroom. He threw my shit out in like 4 seconds, didn't give a fuck about anything, and then that was a long time ago. And then I've also had Judge Susan Nelson. She's a very, 50 years as a judge or something. And then she's actually partially retired. She's a senior, partially retired judge. She's actually the only one that ever actually wrote a judgment that actually had information in it that was actually very helpful and very knowledgeable in terms of what was going on in her opinion. All the other judges I've ever had was just fuck you, dismissed, and there was no information. So I actually, as much as Susan Nelson burned me, she said I was practicing law without a license and all this stuff because it was actually through a client of mine. It wasn't actually my case. She burned me pretty good. She was very mean and aggressive, but at the same time, she gave a lot of really good information about what was going on in the case. So I actually respect that more than dismiss, fuck you, no information. There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I actually have more respect for Judge Susan Nelson than almost anybody else, even though she was actually by far the most mean to me. Just because everybody else, nobody says anything. No,
and that's the sad part is one.
I feel like there should be a rule. Where opinions, dude, if you go back 150 years, or if you look at a lot of Supreme Court cases, they go on for like 80 pages. Now, do I think everything should be 80 pages? No, that's not feasible. I get it. But dismissed and literally zero anything, and I've put 40 pages of documentation on the docket, and there's not even a fucking sentence. It's I feel like that breaks the canons personally.
Well, sometimes the tough part is if you're talking to someone right now in your audience and they're trying to make their speeding ticket of the same level of what you're trying to accomplish, no, you're not going to ever get anything beyond 3 sentences in a judgment entry for your speeding ticket. But when you're coming in with procedural, contentful claims and motions, everything that you file should be addressed. And that's why, again, you're giving satisfaction to a judge that maybe didn't rule in your favor as we thought would be appropriately done. However, you give her the props because she addressed all of the things. Really, we're giving accolades to a human that did their job. And the sad part is we're failing to see where we need to hold the others that didn't do their job accountable. So, speaking to anybody listening to your pursuit here, if somebody files with strict contentions, as I've seen your filings, numbered, cleared, distinct, with case law citing, if they're leaving contention 3 unaddressed, you have an unsatisfied judgment entry, and you should be filing something with them to get further clarification, which you can do. But
How do you do that? I go to appeals, but that doesn't seem to really do anything either. I had 2 or 3 appeals case. I've had 1, 2, 3, 3 cases. 4 cases have gone to appeals. The first one was Susan Nelson. That case went to appeals, and then they didn't say anything, actually, much of anything. And then I had another case go to appeal. It's been sitting there for 7 months. That one hasn't gone anywhere. My Amex case has been sitting there in appeals since November 5th. And then my, I'm trying to think of other cases, but I've gone to appeals. The one case that we finally got a word from appeals, it was literally just a paragraph. And it said, The motion to dismiss is past the 30 days, so we don't have any jurisdiction, and the motion for sanctions is sustained. And that was it. That was literally the entire, and it was like a 25-page appeals brief going into like how my client was sanctioned under Rule 37, but like Rule 11 says that you can't sanction under Rule 37. I forget the whole way we had it structured because it was like 25 pages. But the response was literally just sanctions are sustained. Motion to dismiss is past the 30 days. We don't have any jurisdiction. And that's it. Zero information.
So my answer to you is that there is a fine line of nuance here. And that is, and this is like the importance of what is in that filing. We had an instance where we had a conviction on a case, right? So we put a Topgolf in one of the local communities, and some guy just ghetto stomped the hell out of this waitress. One of the most gruesome things I've seen when I was the judge's bailiff. And the prosecutor, even after getting conviction, like it was so gruesome and so clear, the person pleads to it, so we don't even have a trial. And on sentencing, the prosecutor compels the judge, the court, please let me still play the video evidence because this is the most gruesome video I've seen in this jurisdiction. And if, for whatever reason, this guy does an appeal of any type, this piece of evidence needs to follow with it to the next court. So if that wasn't played in the first initial hearing, even though it was exchanged in discovery and exists, the appellate court can only review what was done within the scope of the record and the docket. And so getting back to that fine line of nuance, when you are making an appeal, if your appeal only, so let's just say you go to your lower court and you go, I contest because of contention 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? And the judge in her judgment entry addresses 1, 2, and 4. She doesn't address 3. One of the things you're inquiring is, I want an articulation on 3. I want her to have to address it. Even if she disagrees with it, I want a legal explanation on why. So she fails to do that. If you appeal to the court making these 4 arguments again, the court, the higher court, the appellate court, is going to take this on the grounds you're appealing is that the judge mismanaged procedure, didn't apply the law accurately to your claim. And that's why they go, nope, and just move on. However, if your filing is raising that point, I feel they failed to accurately apply the procedure to my argument. And one of my contentions is that I still don't have an explanation on 3. So it is as though the judge is ignoring 3 as well. Now the appellate court's going to go, okay, we do believe the judge applied the procedure correct. However, we're going to remand the case because this thing is still outstanding and the judge needs to rectify it with an explanation. And if the explanation is unsatisfactory or incomplete, then you could appeal that and, you may not get very far, but that would be the process at which you require a judge to address something that they may have had as a hanging chad that they never really get back to.
So it would almost be like a procedural complaint in itself as part of your appeal, essentially, almost.
Yes.
How would you describe that? So you would just say this section of this docket of this item was never addressed? Is there like a term for that?
Again, I have to refrain. I'm not necessarily giving you legal advice.
No, I'm not saying. Now, again, legal advice would be if I said, hey, I have this SBA case.
What should I do?
They didn't talk about. This is good to know because my audience fucks this up all the time too. This is legal advice. Here's legal advice. Hey, I have this SBA case. Let me show you the docket. So here on item number 10, you'll see here there was this question. The judge never addressed this. How should I take this item number 10 from docket number 31 and get it addressed in the appeals court? That's all the way into the field of legal advice. Now, how would I ask that same question in a way that wouldn't be legal advice. Very simple. So the question would be like, so what if a guy had a thing in a case that he didn't know?
This is just a disclaimer that gives me the ability to give you advice off the top of my head, because it's an acknowledgement that I'm not the doctor, right? So I don't have the state has not determined that I have met the standard to legally give you the advice. Like, I would have to refrain from it, or else the state would say I'm committing a crime. So I only use it as a legal disclaimer because I want to emphasize I'm not carrying myself out as an authority on this answer. So if I am inaccurate off the top of my head, I'm giving you the wrong advice, or I'm missing something, then it can't catch up to me. That's the only reason somebody says that. I'm not at the capacity to give you that advice and be legally culpable.
If you were at a clerk or you're at a pro se clinic, the way you would ask a question like that to really protect the person you're asking is, if the monkey behind you on the painting had a question to a court, and he asked the court, hey, this banana that was issued to the defendant who I'm suing was never given back to me, and the court themselves never addressed the fact that this banana had been stolen, what terminology would you use when you're going to appeals to say, hey, appeals court, this lower district or state superior court never addressed the third question or the third cause of action that Mr. Monkey had, which was this banana that was essentially stolen by the defendant? And I guess that's the question I have.
So you could present it in that filing in multiple ways, and, as most people in the legal field would, you would probably want to present it in multiple factions, that way to strengthen your argument. Throw as much as you can against the wall to see what sticks. I would present it in a way that the judgment entry is incomplete, so that it needs further completion. It's an incomplete judgment entry.
Is there a local rule on that? Is there a local rule on that? Incomplete judgment entry?
And again, that I would advocate to the individual, like, venue, subject matter jurisdiction. It really depends on where you're located, because you could really, and that's why.
But there's no terminology. You wouldn't go file a. Okay.
This is the artsy, creative element in the legal field. So 90% of these attorneys are morons, but what makes an attorney more expensive is that Johnny Cochran can just come up with the glove doesn't fit. Like, that isn't anywhere beyond a show that he put on in a courtroom, and it worked. So there's also an engineering, a creative, abstract cutting and rearranging. Like, if it isn't in your local city ordinance, it probably won't be, but you could probably find something in the state of Ohio, or you're in the state of California. Is there a county appellate court that has addressed this in some sort of way? But again, that's why these people, you either become the person, or you sew your mouth shut and stop complaining about having to pay for the person that's willing to do this. But that is an exercise. The person that's willing to do the backflips through case law to try to find out the most creative way of arguing that the judgment entry is incomplete, which there are ways of doing that, and then also showing that, and if that would be my first attack, is the entry itself. You've left out things that are at odds. But therefore, ipso facto, if you left things out and therefore it's incomplete, that's also conceding or emphasizing the fact that there are still contentions at odds, or the judgment entry is incomplete, but there are still arguments, claims. There are still claims by the defendant that either have been addressed by the prosecutor but is wrong because of X, Y, and Z, or failed to be addressed by the prosecutor or the state or the city or whatever, and the judge has failed to weigh in on this evidence. So then you're forcing the judge to have to address something that the prosecutor did or did not supply, but is still at odds with your claim.
Good to know. Yeah, because I use the on my appeals cases, and depending on what SBA does, this one might go to appeals too. I've already told the judge I'm going to appeals if he fucks around with this. This is bullshit. They have an informal brief that they actually issue through the actual district court website, and it's simple. It's beyond simple. Like a normal bar card, they have to do this whole thing, and there has to be like a timeline, and there has to be all these attachments, and there has to be a list of table of contents. A pro se, it's just this. It's called an informal brief, and it's like, what are the problems with your case? You fucking. They stole my banana. Is there any case law or anything that you know about that could have something to do with this? No. Are you incarcerated? No. What all have you tried to do to handle this in the courts? Well, I did this and I did this and we did this. Is there any outstanding motions on the case? It's like baby shit. It's like baby shit.
Well, and again, I don't want to take away from emphasizing that's the general level of competency that we're dealing with. Not everybody meets your level of work that they've invested in this. And that's why, it's got to be cookie cutter. It's spoon-fed because you're dealing with people that refuse, that do not want to invest that work or finance into it, but are expecting the same result of what your input produces. I do want to say I got about 25 minutes left here.
Okay, that's good then.
Could we? Do you want to try to incorporate some of the audience questions, or did you have more?
Yeah, we have a great question that just came in right now, and I don't want people who have already asked a bunch of questions to feel left out, but I wanted to kind of get things rolling and ask my questions first, and then kind of get into their questions. And we can always do more shows in the future. So if you don't get your question answered, don't fucking freak out. We'll have more questions. I'm sure there's plenty. We could probably go on for 20 hours or 50 hours on this whole thing and do 10 shows, and we'd probably do great. So this one here is a very good one. Jay says, they never answer our complaint. They just call us sovereign citizens. Said in the voice of Brandon. LOL. Yeah. So I have this happen quite a bit, and you think to yourself, well, are you being rude? Are you being mean? Are you freaking out? No. In fact, I'm trying to get hearings. I have asked for hearings, and obviously that every motion has to have a hearing date. So whether I ask for it or not, there's always been one. They've always been canceled. I've never actually gotten a hearing ever. So the problem and the question is, how do we have very unique claims? Like, for example, most of our claims involve, negotiable instruments, unconditional promises, and orders to pay. UCC Article 3. For whatever reason, courts just, you say anything about any commercial code at all in any jurisdiction, and the courts just, we can't tell if they just hate commercial codes. We can't tell if they don't understand it and they don't want their egos to be damaged, so they don't get into it. We can't tell if they're not allowed to talk about it. We can't tell. It's like fighting a shadow. We can't tell. So what is it? What is it about commercial codes that just drives the courts absolutely? It's like they will sooner go in the back and snort arsenic and kill themselves before they will talk about commercial codes.
Part of my problem is the members of your audience that are going to resonate with that point are resonating with that point because their representative, Brandon Joe Williams, understands the UCC. So they think ipso facto they have an understanding of the UCC because the guy that's kind of carrying the torch does. I only make that point because I want to emphasize to the person that's listening to this, agree. You don't understand the UCC.
Well, I have the same issue.
I'm only making that point.
I have the same issue.
Well, I'm only making that point because I don't understand the UCC. As somebody that spends 4 months with paid money carved out 2 hours a day, shows up to a course, it was like ripping teeth out. It is miserable. It's probably the most dense book I walked out of that building with. It is incredibly difficult. I think when you're talking, and again, I'm at a municipal level, but and there is no reason an appellate court should shy or hide from the challenge of overlapping laws, especially with something as impactful and weighty as the UCC. However, grounding it to where I'm at, if we're talking about driving without a license or driving under suspension, and you start talking about the UCC, I'll be real with you, you're talking to a court of attorneys that probably haven't touched that in 10 years and aren't really seeing the gymnastics of how you got the UCC to driving under suspension. Now, that is far from a justification and a reason for them to dismiss and be able to escape that confrontation. That should be demanded by us of the public and the system itself. When those things are raised, ignorance is never a justification or an excuse to escape it. So I can't say to why they may just never respond. But one thing that I want to ground my point with is something that you had said an hour ago. You were explaining how you're willing to have, the patience of going through this system and chipping away at all of the different legal mechanisms and resources available to you. And you're like, well, I have a different way of processing this whole thing, and that's why other people are getting frustrated quicker and kind of punching in the dark, going in the wrong direction. And I think what makes your approach stronger than other people through this endeavor is you have totally internalized the game of patience. And in the legal system, patience is the virtue that's going to supersede all. Because if you're willing to let the mechanism walk itself out into its entirety, so if you submitted a claim and they don't ever respond with an answer, then one, it's gonna catch up in court. But you just said I never had a trial. Well, then to me that reads as, okay, we're not getting the precedent we want, which is you in a courtroom beating the system that you and other people can then cite moving forward. We are cheated that opportunity. However, we can't get everything we want. The nice thing is, at least you saw the result that you found justified. The state is acting upon your liberty. You support with all of this legal evidence on why that's inappropriate, and they don't give you the answer that we wanted, but at least you're not in a concrete cage. They're not taking your money or whatever. So they're not winning. So there's at least that element where we aren't happy because we're not getting the answers that we could use in the future. We're not getting the precedent we could use in the future, but they aren't availing over you in your pursuit, which is also really the first step of the win. That's the first step, and it goes from there. So I guess my piece of advice would be anybody else in Brandon Joe Williams' shoes is try to have faith in the system by leaning on the patience that Brandon exudes, which is let the system work itself out because I will beat you at your own game. It intentionally moves slow. It intentionally is incredibly expensive because it's trying to exhaust your patience. And with that patience, you can conquer it. But if you get lost in the very human emotion that the system creates, the system will beat you down, and you'll never make it.
Why is it like that? Like, is it?
I'm not
because I've thought a lot about this, and the only thing I can think of is like, from a positive standpoint, it's sort of like, why are we here 1776, 300 years or 250 years later? And yeah, we've had a few major changes that have occurred, most of which I speak about. That's my whole platform. But if it wasn't for, like, let's say 1871, if you just deleted 1871 entirely, if you just deleted that whole year from our entire history, this country has gone through almost no change in 250 plus years. And, like, in my mind, I'm thinking, is that what it is? Are they protecting?
So
are they protecting? It's a conversation I want to have, because it's sort of like, why is it that way? Like, what is the mentality behind that behavior?
So I don't think it's not an intentional element to the mechanism. There's no mentality behind it that crafts it in that way. It's more of the result, the symptom of the mechanism itself. And I emphasize it that way because, one, listen, guys, I'm with you. I am an antagonist to the system just as much as you are, because that's the only way we sharpen the blade. I don't want to put myself in a role where I'm a defender of the system, because I want to call upon it to be better as well. I acknowledge that this is definitely something that it falls short with. However, just to give you a little scope of perspective from my lens in a small court in the Cleveland area, right? 9 city jurisdictions, and in 2021, the Supreme Court of Ohio, we've got these camera tickets now, and we've got people that call and they go, the Supreme Court said they're illegal. Why do you still do them?
Camera can't write an affidavit. A camera can't. Rules of Evidence 602 and 603. There has to be personal knowledge, and it has to be under oath or affirmation. Cameras can't do that. So I'm also a little bit pissed off about that myself.
Trust me, I couldn't be more. But Ed, I would tell these people that are cussing me out, I go, please do something. Nothing ever changes, nothing ever comes about it unless somebody does something. But that's neither here nor there. To give you the perspective that I was going to kind of flesh out, before the camera tickets, so what happened in that Supreme Court case, they didn't determine that camera tickets are illegal. All they determined is that they have to be filed at municipal courts. So some of them were being done at mayor's courts, some of them were going to higher courts. This determined that they have to go to municipal courts.
Why?
Again, I'm not gonna, because there's holes in the statute. They created something and they're trying to fill the gaps as they go.
Okay.
So before these camera tickets, were operating at about 40 to at most 50,000 cases. That's civil, criminal, traffic. That's about what our capacity was.
A year?
A year.
Okay,
then
a year.
the Supreme Court case comes around, and there's 2 jurisdictions there's 2 cities within our jurisdiction that have camera tickets. They now have to file them in our court. We have to create a whole data stream, a whole nother arm to our system for us to be able to do this. And we are getting 80,000 camera tickets filed with us. That's more than what we were getting even just criminal, traffic, and civil. This is one just simple department. So the problem is capacity. And it's not a justification, but truthfully, as somebody boots on the ground, I could tell you in our court, you are getting heard as fast as humanly possible. And truthfully, for people in your shoes that want a speedy trial and want it done now, you'd be amazed how quick it can be done. It's just people aren't as privy to the mechanisms that speed it up.
Well, what makes me mad is, like, camera ticket is about as commercial code as it gets. That's like
yes.
That's like if there wasn't the UCC, that wouldn't exist in 400 trillion lifetimes. It wouldn't exist in 400 trillion light years. So then you come in and you start talking about the Uniform Commercial Code, and they just. And I can do a screen share. I've pulled up some of my judgments here because I wanted to show you these.
While you explain that, I'm going to listen. I'm running to the bathroom real quick. I'm sorry.
You can still hear that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, you can't see these. Anyways, maybe I'll just talk a little bit, and then we'll hit it when you get back. So this first one I'm sharing here is. Basically, I have 3 different judgments here. I have one from Susan Nelson. This is actually the first case. I have one from Gary Klossner, which is the case I'm dealing with now. But the final judgment never came down with the Gary Klossner. This is just an order to dismiss the case, but it wasn't a final judgment. So I went fucking berserk, filing all sorts of shit in, trying to prevent the final judgment after he gave this. And then we have Fitzgerald here. This one is for my American Express case, and you can see here, so we've got many filings into this case here for Fitzgerald. This is about American Express. This is a case about me saying how every time I use my credit card, an unconditional promise to pay is generated from every single transaction. That unconditional promise to pay is a promissory note in itself, which is essentially U.S. currency in itself. And I'm like, where the hell did all my unconditional promises to pay go? And
Right.
I'm like basically claiming them. I'm saying to the court, like, I never gave these things away. I never abandoned these things. I never knew that I was just walking away from all of these valuable unconditional promises to pay, which are all exchangeable for Federal Reserve notes through the Federal Reserve discount window. And the response from him was just this. It was like, here are the following motions that are here. No reply. This is vacated. It is so ordered. And then this is just like a generic thing that they say on
Right.
everything. And that was it. And then that was the end of it, right? Here we have Gary Klossner.
Oh, back to like terms of the trade. I would reinforce, like on appeal, I'd reinforce the case on its merit, right? So all the merit of the legal precedent that I've submitted, that's the word. So I'm trying to re-support my case on its merit. I think the judge was, wrong in its evaluation of the case's merit.
I did that.
And then I would reestablish it being an incomplete judgment, being that it never addresses.
I did that as well, and then also the
intentions split out.
judge gave relief from the defense doing a meet and confer with me. They filed a motion for relief from Local Rule 7-3 to do a meet and confer. I put that in the appeal. I was like, local rules are considered laws. The judge can't circumvent those laws, and that was part of my appeal.
That's true.
So
you're right.
That pissed me off, right? Because I think the meet and confer thing, there are a lot of jurisdictions that don't have that. Dude, I'm telling you, I've never read a local rule or a rule where I was like, this is fucking stupid. I've read some that are slightly annoying, but they make sense. But the meet and confer, dude, like certain jurisdictions, like in Minnesota and stuff that don't have that, I'm like, what the fuck? Do you guys have that in Ohio?
I'm sorry. Do we have what? I'm sorry.
So
I was
the
reading one of the comments.
Meet and confer is like you have to have a teleconference, and in California it says preferably in person, but not required. You have to have a teleconference that goes into the core aspects of the motion, and then you have to wait 7 days after the teleconference or in-person meeting is completed to actually file the motion. It's called meet and confer. Do you guys have that in Ohio?
No. To my understanding,
That's a
our
fucking disaster.
pre-trials operate in that fashion.
That's
so
a
we
fucking
use
disaster.
pre-trials for that.
That is the coolest thing ever. And in this case, with Fitzgerald, they filed for relief from that.
Oof.
And you can see it right here.
And again,
motion for relief is wait.
In any of your filings, did you demand for that, or did you not know you could demand for that? And it's sad that you
I
should know that you
I forget everything that we went into, but the bottom line was in the appeal, I was like, so wait a second. So the judge can just pretend and just pick and choose which local rules he wants to fucking, you know what I mean? That was basically my contention in the appeal. And the appeal's been sitting there for forever, since November 5th.
So, I do want to just, since we're kind of landing the plane here with the last few minutes, I'm looking at the comments, and there's a theme, right? Like, could it be more evident that the system is set up to perpetuate itself and not protecting the rights of the people? A judge will always protect the guild before any acts or statutes or codes. And, truth be told, Brandon, I loved our conversation. That was one of the most fun podcasts I've had to date, or it is. And yet, most of the comments were totally supportive. I found it funny, my jab, the jab that I had to take was you sent the tweet out that this was a debate. And I really wasn't trying to fight you. And that's something I want to say to
The first show.
Because that's kind of the comment I have to all the people in the chat here as well, is I think because you've been adverse to the system for so long that there's this conviction that the people you're up against are adverse to you. And one of the things that I had kind of laid out when we first spoke was I'm in your corner hoping you succeed just as much as I think your own audience does. And I'm in the system. I'm the one that's protecting the guild and protecting the system. We got to remember, folks, that like this system of government, the court, you know, all of this, our community is built of people like us. It's us. It's us. You know, the Rothschilds and the Clintons and the higher echelon, that's so removed from the lower level mechanism that's policing your day-to-day. And because they're humans and they do fall short. But I think because we've run into hard times and human instinct is, you know, the number of people that will walk in there and know that they did wrong. Was I speeding? Yes, but the cop was racist. But the cop, you know, did this, whatever, X, Y, and Z. Part of the problem is we fail as a society to have actual culpability and like accountability. And so a lot of these people are frustrated at a system that probably held them accountable justly. And for when they are inaccurate, they give a judgment that's wrong or they apply the law wrong, we ignore that someone like Brandon Joe Williams has the ability to put in the time and hold it accountable. Let the process work itself out. But Brandon can look at us and say, I've never had a hearing, and yet I've never lost. How do those two things operate amongst itself if the system isn't willing to concede when your position is right? Right?
Well, I lose everything, but then I go to appeals, and then we've only had one case finalize in appeals, which is actually my very first case, which is actually by far my weakest case. So besides that case, everything else is still in progress at the appellate level.
But look at that perfect story you shared just, I think, this past week. Here's a guy that has his sovereign license plates, right? He's just a visitor. And the police wanted to mess with him. Hey, you can't park there. He goes, whatever, keeps walking.
Oh, yeah.
And then cops knuckle bump him because they're like, hey, dude, you got it all figured out.
That was a traffic officer or a traffic guy. It wasn't a cop, but yes, correct.
Sure, but again, what version of compartmentalized thinking do you have to have when those stories excite you, but then you're convicted in the belief that all the judges are against you, all of the clerks that are building the mechanism, all the prosecutors, there are nefarious people. There are nefarious people selling you a rental car at Avis. So that's just statistics of people. That isn't a reflection and indicative of the system in its whole. And the fact that you are able to succeed at all, maybe not at the level we'd like it to, we'd like to see more success, we'd like to see more pushback, but the fact that you could find success at all tells you there are good actors that exist that do have preserving the system at the forefront of their goals versus their own agenda, protecting their friends, and maybe any other nefarious acting or agent that promotes their actions.
I spend a lot of time thinking about this. I spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, like how do I get out of them thinking I'm the biggest piece of shit in the world? What do I need to do? Do they think I'm fucking crazy? If they do, like, what am I supposed to do? Because, like, every time I say commercial code, which everything that comes out of my mouth is essentially involving the commercial code, it's either sovereign citizen or it's psychopath, and it's just like, and it's just like, do they hate me? Are they not allowed to talk about it? Is it an ego thing? Are they confused? You know, and that's been my struggle, because that is everything I do. All of my cases are 99, really 100% UCC. So, for example, on the federal, and I know you got to go in a minute and a half. Federal cases they have a civil cover sheet. Point number 140, I believe it is on the civil cover sheet, is literally negotiable instruments. It's straight the fuck up. Whereas on the state civil cover sheet, they don't have that. It's other contract. There's a section called other contract. That's the one I use for the state civil cover sheet. But then the UCC isn't federal law. So, like, I go in there and I start to ask questions, and I'm like, okay, the UCC isn't federal law. So for like 8 months, I was like quoting the UCC or using the California Commercial Code, and I was like, I know it's not federal law, but like, what other body of law you guys have negotiable instruments right here on the civil cover sheet? So tell me, if it's not the UCC or the CCC, what in the flying fuck body of law would it fall under? And then they're probably thinking like, oh, we're not going to give him legal advice. But I've been digging for 8-9 months trying to figure it out. There is no other answer. It is the UCC and the CCC. That is the answer to the question, right? So what did I do? After 8-9 months of getting my head bashed in and nobody telling me a fucking thing, I started to build out and locate all of the original Supreme Court cases that build out the UCC. And I started making an entire list of all of the Supreme Court cases that build and back the UCC. And that is the new tactic that I'm using in the SBA case, which hasn't had a final judgment yet. So that's brand new. It's a brand new tactic, right? So, but it's like, if I don't get any feedback, ever.
Can I leave you with this piece? The eureka moment your explanation just gave me, the light bulb. One of the inquiries you opened up just a little while ago is, why are they so afraid to get into the UCC? And my first knee-jerk reaction was because that was the most painful course I had, and it's so freaking difficult. But really, that isn't the answer, Brandon, and I think I know why. When you approach a judge, municipal level, appellate level, but if it's in the context of criminal, but even when you use it in the context of civil,
I'm
right?
only civil, yeah.
Sure. When you come in and you're using the UCC, you got to realize, and this is a poor explanation, but this is the why. That person operating in their set of rules of their game, right back to the baseball versus basketball game thing I was talking about, when that person has played baseball a certain way forever, and you walk in, you got to, my piece of, my little gem for you to close this out with is you're the first person I can guarantee you to walk in there using the UCC. And they short circuit because they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. The UCC has never been played in this realm. That's over there. That's commercial code. That's for the trading of goods. And here's the dynamic I'm realizing after you give that whole explanation is and I'm not saying wrong or right. This is why we need a judge or an authority to determine that. But your interpretation of the law is through a commercial lens. Social Security, we're all corporate entities. You're not a person. For all of the math to check out for your interpretation of the law, your operative law then is the UCC. Because your persons is a corporation, like your whole which again, not right, not wrong, but this is where, what do they call it, Doug, do you remember, what do they call where salt water meets fresh water? Like when a river of fresh water hit, like where timeless.
Well, this is like what you were saying earlier in the show, like the art part of it. We start getting into the art part of it, where
exactly.
It's like I've created my own form of martial art. I'm like the Jeet Kune Do of fucking legal, and I'm going in there, because and they're like, what the fuck is this dude doing with nunchucks and weirdo shit?
For the sovereign understanding to hold water, you need to be able to apply the UCC. But you're applying a whole code that is used for predominantly trade, the trading of goods and services. It is for commercial trade, and yet we're pulling upon them because your interpretation of people and their agency is as if they were corporations trading and operating with services. So the problem is you're looking at people that are like, we aren't corporate entities, we're people. Like their interpretation of citizen, their interpretation of a person's relationship with the state, their community bars them from being able to, it's like, they will never, I think, until your bedrock foundation of law is addressed, they will never even be able to see why you're calling upon the UCC. It takes you explaining, the thing that I need the most, they're not even listening to. I didn't even see that the thing you use the most doesn't even meet them, because they're like, there's no goods being traded here. So why are we talking about UCC? There's no services being traded, because they don't look at that relationship the same. And I'm not saying that it's right, but that's what needs to be challenged.
That's why they always dismiss my, and I already knew this, they dismiss my breach of fiduciary duties when it comes to loans, because they say that there's case law that in a loan debtor situation, there is no fiduciary duties. But my response to that situation is it isn't a loan, it's a currency exchange, which they've never seen that argument before. And then it's based off the fact that the original loan documentation, the mortgage documentation, is an unconditional promise to pay, which is a negotiable instrument, which makes it under the UCC. So the whole thing, the whole basis of the whole thing is a signature that goes on a piece of paper that's governed by the Uniform Commercial Code. And to me, that's as simple as getting up and brushing your teeth and eating a ham sandwich and walking out the door. But to a court, I guess, I'm learning that's just, no one's ever really brought that up, I guess, or whatever. So
unfortunately. But again, that's the value in these proceedings. Like, again, it's work. It takes time. It takes effort. But that's why it's so important, because so few. How does a Brandon Joe Williams climb to the top of all of your eyeballs and all of your attention? Because he's the one putting in work more than anyone else. And somebody else could be a part of that. Birds of a feather, if they're willing to put in the work that also carries the torch.
And there's people who are waiting for it to get easier, but if we had more people doing this, it would get easier a lot faster. I've told my audience that many times. And, I've never had the thought of giving up, because the idea of giving up there'd be a second question, is giving up to do what? Where would I go? What would I do? And there's no answer to that. So giving up is never something I've ever asked myself. It's not even a part of my vocabulary, because give up and then go do what? Go sip pina coladas on the beach while my country goes to absolute fucking hell in the next 4 or 5 years? That's not an option. Do you know what I mean? Giving up has never even crossed my mind.
Here's the perfect comment in our chat here. Of the courts, if the courts is what he meant to say, if the courts ever agree that there is two different individuals, the legal entity and the living man, the whole administrative state falls. There's some value to that.
There's case law. No, there's already case law on this. If you go down the rabbit hole of the sole proprietorship and you start looking up case law on the subject of sole proprietorships and their structure, which I've already done some of that, they've already established a lot of this. They don't say it in quite those same terminology. They use the term sole proprietorship, and then they use the term owner, and then they say the case law is basically like the owner and the sole proprietorship are treated as though they have no legal separation, right? And there's not a whole lot of this out there, but there's enough of it to structurize, right? And it only applies to two types of corporation. It only applies to single person LLC or a sole proprietorship. There's special case law, and no one's ever talked about this special case law for these special corporations. If I have a corporation, a normal ass C Corp or S Corp, as per local rules, I have to have an attorney at law representing that particular corporation. But there's case law on sole proprietorships and single person LLCs that say that you don't have to do that. There's tax cases that say that a sole proprietorship being sued actually has the right to a Fifth Amendment defense to not produce documentation, because the owner and the fucking whatever, the owner and the sole proprietorship are considered the quote same person-ish. They don't really get into what that means. So like some people are like, well, Brandon, you're getting into this like really gray zone, and they think of it as a bad thing. I think of it as a good thing, because if it's a gray zone, then I'm the one who's going to put forth, as for Rule 301, I'm the one who can put forth all the presumptions, and now I'm going to saddle the defense with having to fucking provide all the evidence. Because if you look at the Rules of Evidence 301 says that if you presume something, then now the other party has to defend and provide evidence for it. So I'm going to create this whole big cloud, and then I'm just going to shoot fucking presumption missiles. I'm going to do the same thing they've been doing to us for 100 fucking years, right back at them, but I'm going to be in this like nice situated fortress, and I'm just going to fucking obliterate them with it. You know, but then I do that, and then the defense says I'm weird, I'm crazy, I'm unintelligible, and then the judge says I'm unintelligible, and then fuck, now what?
That is indefensible, truthfully.
Yeah.
Like the moment where you reach the now what and the system has failed you, you know, as the comments indicate, there's other actions that need to be taken because that's an injustice, you know. And truthfully, I don't feel as though I see that enough, whereas overwhelmingly en masse, I see what I think is the people who are in that room getting kind of what they deserve. But again, I'm lower level. Were you driving without a suspension? We're not getting in a murder
There's
case.
a lot of guys. It's even like that one dude who ran through that whole crowd of people, and then he went and tried doing sovereign citizen defenses. There are a lot of guys who get into really bad situations, and then they wind up running to the sovereign citizen defense, and then at that point, it makes all of our lives so much harder because now those guys become the quote-unquote gold standard of what anyone who knows anything about their own rights or defends themselves in a court of law knows, and it just makes the hill that much harder for us to climb.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And again, that's why, you know, I'm not here, some apologist trying to defend the system, but we also need to kind of realize that we need to have something that preserves law and order, something that keeps us protected from the Vladimir Putins and Kim Jong-uns of the world. We need to have some form of community in society that, one, brings about law and order, and again, you have cancer, and the medicine development that got you that cancer is huge result of a strong community. iPhones, like a lot of these advancements aren't going to come from a state of 350 million individual countries. Like I have full confidence and satisfaction, praise for the pursuit you and your followers are on. I just as equally get excited when you find the success as much as you do, because we're
I
cheering
spent a lot
for
of
it.
time trying to put out flames. People who are absolutely pissed, who would love nothing more than to strap God knows what to God knows what and do God knows what, which I'm not even going to say because that's going to get me in trouble. But it's I spent a lot of time and a lot of sections of my course, and even in my own head, the past year has been a slow process of having all these fucking thousands and thousands of people telling me it's all devil worshiping, it's all this, it's all Freemasons, it's all bullshit, it's all this. But at the same time, in the other side of my head, I'm like, well, if it ain't this, what the fuck am I going to do? If it ain't this, where the fuck am I going to go? If I ain't going to go into the fucking courts and do this and file these fucking stupid-ass motions, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And that's where I get pissed off, because I'm like, I don't see any other option, you know, and people want to sit around and fucking complain and moan and do all these things. It's like, bro, like, I got to a certain point. No, I didn't want to get into litigation originally. It terrified me just as much as anybody else. But I got to a certain point where it's like, bro, what the fuck else am I supposed to do? And I'm still in that same category, and no one's ever answered that question. If someone wants to answer that question, let's do it. I don't see any other option.
The answer to your question, I don't know if you've felt it, but even just in the last 2 months, the culture is shifting.
Oh, yeah.
I've been told about a pendulum that I never thought fucking existed, because we just kept going darker and darker and darker down the hole. But for the first time ever in the last, at least what feels like the last decade, the pendulum is coming back.
Oh, yeah.
And so what I say is, what the fuck else do I do? Dude, we underplay how much value there is in these conversations. We're building a culture. You're building a community. You're connecting with people that you have othered and have felt was on the other side of the V as an antagonizer to your pursuit forever. And the more our lines bleed into each other, the more we're willing to have these dialogues. We lift the veil of othering each other, and we very quickly... I'm connecting with somebody in California. What was my sign-off joke on the last podcast? I didn't think there was anything redeemable in California. So guess what?
That's right.
Here's somebody on the other side of this giant rock that we can connect. We can help each other where we have that ability. And I do think where the system falls short, because what is a government besides a mechanism of controlling people? Yeah. I just sit here and advocate as the philosophy degree in me. I don't find a world where I can advocate for no government. I'm always going to be critical of the government and wanting to hold it accountable, but on the flip side, we need to have something that preserves law and order, that gives us some sort of welfare assistance and protects us against the crazy people with nukes on the other parts of this rock. So I look at it as we can always get a better system. The way to push for a better system, look at Orwell. They need to control the papers, keep us isolated from each other, and control information to preserve their power. Well, as long as we're connecting, building communities, and having the dangerous conversations, I'm sorry, to the mechanism, to a Rothschild, this right here is so much more dangerous than the crazy Marine in your comments that wants to go grab something, tie it to something, and send it to someone.
Yeah.
That talk to the Unabomber. Nobody had it more figured out than that guy, and he's a joke. So guess how you actually change the world? Right here. Rethink.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I recap all my dockets and stuff. I want to make it all available for people to read. It's all about, and I talk about it all the time. I mean, a lot of these conversations. Where is the United States? What is a citizen? These are conversations that haven't been had in over 100 years. And basically, if you were to boil down my platform to the basic simplicity, is just getting people to start talking about it and asking questions. What is the 14th Amendment? What is that first sentence that people have been talking about since the day it was fucking supposedly ratified? It never was. Congress already told us it wasn't in 1967. But people have been complaining and arguing about what that first sentence means since literally August 18th, 1871. So it's just, it comes down to conversations. It comes down to conversations in the court. It comes down to ideally making your dockets available so that everybody can read them without necessarily having to have a Pacer account, which is also very helpful. It comes down to having conversations via video, via audio, in person, events, whatever. And we'll go ahead and leave it at that. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to give you the floor for any ending thoughts here in just a moment. I want to say thank you. We're probably going to do some additional shows. I know many people did not get much answered in the comments. It's mainly my questions. We'll probably do some stuff in the future. We will get more questions answered as we go. So I apologize if it wasn't as interactive as we had planned. I am very happy with the show, so I don't really give a shit. Fuck you. But at the same time, I know it was probably people came in here thinking it would be more interactive, and it wasn't. But there just wasn't. This first show, there was some things that kind of needed to go over, and maybe even a second time before we're going to start getting into a whole lot. I think I have to feel exhausted of my questions before we're going to start getting into a lot of the goofiness that I've been seeing in the comment section. It just annoys the fuck out of me, a lot of it. So go ahead and close it out. Anything else you want to say, Alex?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I live for these opportunities to connect with a challenge, an ideological challenge. And, the whole thing that I would propose to anybody in the comments, and really this should just be the pursuit you take on in life. You don't need to be right. You should just, and you can safely believe that as long as you are constantly on the pursuit of growth and challenge. Because what happens is we tie ourselves to our ideas. So when people challenge our ideas, we feel personally challenged, and then our emotions get involved, or it derails our ability to actually have a productive conversation. So I like to approach these conversations with liberate me from my ignorances, baby. I'm begging you to, I'm coming into an ideological arena, a free marketplace of ideas, holding my shield, my ideas, and I hope you're able to defeat them. Because then that allows me to not go into tomorrow carrying that same ignorance. So you should actually look for opportunities to have your ideas challenged and hopefully changed. I like to hope I can deliver on that. That's the goal of us at the Rethink Tank. Every Tuesday we do a live show, and similar to this, we get comments involved. It's to have all of us in the dialogue. I'm not trying to sit here and preach at you. I'm trying to create a space where we can wrestle truth together, because, guys, back to my point about Brandon, where his frustration is, what do I do when the system continues to turn its back on me? Guess what? Over the course of the last 20 years, the system is losing its grip, and it's slowly getting away with them, exponentially, now faster more than ever.
Yeah.
Why? Because we are finally tapping into the human hive. We, as a mass, is stronger than any mechanism they could put in front of us. And so as long as we're willing to challenge ourselves, you're willing to involve yourself ideologically for growth purposes with people that are different than you, you come out a sharper blade. And that should be your only goal. Not to reinforce what you walked in with, but to walk out stronger. So with all that being said, if we made you laugh, if we made you think, you can find all of our Rethink Tank content. Today, we've got a palate cleanser show, a different channel, our reactions channel, where we talked about just the most expensive foods and how ridiculous people are for spending money on it. These types of things you could find. Our podcast, Brandon Joe Williams and I have an amazing show that is just popping off right now. I couldn't be more thankful for you and your community and bringing back such great feedback that's helping us grow in the studio. All of that can be found in one central place, and that's at our website at www.rethinktankpodcast.com. So please don't be a stranger. Fortunately, that's why these endeavors are so important and exciting to me. I was able to make a connection with someone like Brandon that, again, won't allow you to be a stranger. I look forward to more opportunities like this where I come onto your show and your audience can involve themselves, but then even more so, Brandon and I have been in talks. We'd like to get a podcast going on where he tries to prove that we need to get rid of the 14th Amendment, and I'm looking for maybe to do that in March, because one of the things I'd like to deliver on is, if not a judge, having a prosecutor sit with us so we can have somebody from that side of the lens defend that position, or maybe we see that they've never really thought about it and watch in their eyes the first time it's ideologically confronted, right? That
the
would
fear
be
in their
what
eyes.
I'd like to achieve. Yes. I'm sorry, but that's a goal, because that speaks more than whatever they may actually say. I don't need to convince that person. It's kind of like these campaigns we've had in politics. What's hurt some of these political parties more than anything is just letting them speak for themselves. What is libs of TikTok beyond letting you people talk for yourself? You said it. I just took your video and posted it. Maybe that's what we need, is a conversation with somebody who is an agent or mind of that system. And maybe we don't convince that person, but hell, the whole audience sees it for what it is. They see the wizard behind the curtain, and truthfully, that's all that matters to us, because the hive is the working mechanism. Everything else is just noise.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could pull it off. I mean, I'm in no rush, so do whatever you got to do. But my God, that would be a wild ride if we can get some judges, judge would just be out of this world. I couldn't even believe. Judges are under very, very strict rules. I've looked up all the rules and all the things. They can't be a part of any organization that would be biased. If they have any membership in any organization that could be considered biased in any way, they forfeit their judge status. And it's like then you start thinking like, well, wait a second, they're a Democrat. That's kind of getting into that category.
Yeah. And
so
again,
the conversation is starting to get, because 20 years ago that didn't mean jack shit, Democrat and Republican. Nobody gave a shit. Oh wow, you have 1 millimeter different views than I do. Oh wow, big whoop. Nowadays, it's almost getting to the point where you could bang up against a judge for being democratic and going online and doing shit and saying shit, because that would be part of that canon that says that they can't be involved in organizations that would be biased towards anyone. So it's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting conversation to have. But that's all very new. That's all very new part of our culture. So it's so new that hasn't even exploded yet. No one, to my knowledge, nobody's brought that up as a canon break or something like that yet. So we'll see who will do that, or maybe I'll do that. Who knows? But
that's right.
So yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for being on the show. I'm going to stop the recording now. Hang out for a second because we got to upload the video, and I'll get this posted later today. Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate that.